I'm Derek Fetzer, and I'm originally from Peru, in South America, not Peru, Indiana. Um, and I'm an industrial engineer, and I work in public health at Johnson & Johnson. So I've actually Forrest Gumped my way into public health, right? So very happy. It's a very passionate field, and I'm very glad to be there. We actually just started Global Public Health Unit 2 years ago at Janssen. Janssen is the pharmaceutical company of Johnson & Johnson. And it was formed out of the need, the recognition that a better part of the world doesn't have access to healthcare, right? And so we were formed trying to figure out what new ways might we explore to make that happen. And that's a little bit about why I'm here today. I'm not an expert in crowdsourcing or crowdfunding for that matter, but I don't know exactly what I'm in, but I think perseverance is probably the best thing that I'm expert at, because I'll get into a little bit more about it at the end, but we've just recently launched a crowdfunding platform for global public health. So before I continue, I did want to say that all views expressed are my own. I'll talk a little bit about health needs, right? So a couple years ago, I was involved in a project in Peru, and we were looking to basically see how we could help and intervene in tuberculosis treatment. And in that, and so there's this desire, the global health community has this desire of a world free of tuberculosis, right? I don't know how much you know about it, but it's a scourge. Many million people die every year from this, and it's relatively unknown within the United States. So this lady here, she's a healthcare volunteer. She goes to this medical center, which is just a very temporary thing, no beds, just basic treatment. She takes the medications from there and then walks up these steps, up the side of the mountain here, and delivers the medications every day to the tuberculosis patients. So she's been doing this for 10, 15 years. She doesn't get any payment for this. And I asked her, when I was talking to her, why do you do this? And she said, well, you know something, I had tuberculosis 10, 15 years ago. I was all alone, and it was very scary. And when you think about that, one thing is to be, it's rough being poor, just flat out. It's really bad when you're poor and sick. And so really that's a little bit of the backstory on a lot of this, is that there are so many people like this lady, healthcare volunteers, that need help, right? And I think that really comes to when I start looking at crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, how can we bridge the gap between us here and them, helping her community help themselves out, all of this coming together. And again, this is tuberculosis, so it's not like we live in a world all by ourselves. I mean, it's not any longer each man's an island. I mean, everybody's health actually impacts everybody else's health, right? In a world of increasing population. So it's something to bear in mind, if not for the altruistic sense, but there is also an enlightened self-interest as well, right? I mean, if you think about the Ebola crisis, everybody went into a panic about how that might affect us here in the United States. So really, when we think about this, I just want to highlight the huge need on the global level, right? So many millions of people don't have access to safe drinking water. They don't even have access to a trained physician. Many places in Africa, a maternal ward is really basically an empty room with no running water. All of these we take for granted, but there are millions, and in some cases billions, of people that don't have access to some of the most basic services, goods and services that we have. But around this, I also want to just mention that there's a lot of passion here. And so when we talk about crowdsourcing, I mean, I just think about how many people are involved in global public health. They're all passionate. They want to see change, right? And for me, that's the crowd I want to help develop, right? And make a bit more coherent. And I loved one of the previous slides today was that graphic of the stadium full of people, that mob, and then all of a sudden it becomes an orchestrated, a marching band, And so how could we do that? And that's something that I'm hoping that we'll see develop over the next several years, and that's what at least my team and I are working towards. There's all this passion, and there's all these people out there. There's so many organizations. I was shocked when I found out how many nonprofits there are in the United States alone. I mean, there are 1.5 million nonprofits in the US operating. When we talk about a task, traditional management basically deploys people against a specific responsibility. I don't know exactly how you're going to get it done, but as long as you take care of this and comply, we're good, right? And so that's kind of the operating model. That is still a difficult task. I mean, you have to manage lines of communication and coordination all towards that specific project and with a multitude of other projects and objectives in the background. So many times it's very difficult to get that project moving forward. And so I think what's interesting is I've seen, many times a kind of a diffusion of responsibility. That is, people have this horribly complex problem, they don't know how to grapple with it, and then they just kind of we'll crowdsource it, and they just kind of throw it out there and see what happens. And when it fails, they say, the methodology failed. But really, the burden of the crowdsourcing aspect, it isn't really just tapping into the crowd. It really is on how do you deconstruct that project into modular components, into work units, right? I mean, when I think about this, all the coordination and communication that goes on that basically derails the project, and then this where you're basically saying we want to minimize coordination effort and really just think about work units as modular, as autonomous, and somebody can step up to the plate and just own this aspect. Those components can even work by themselves, in and of themselves, towards a grander picture, then it becomes even more compelling. I think Matt Janssen's presentation was really talking about this, the resistance towards working with the crowd from a big company. And I see that, there are a lot of real fears with working with the crowd. Do they actually know? Can I rely on them? What is the degree of knowledge they have? We work in the healthcare space. It's incredibly complex with lots of legal and ethical considerations. Then there's just fear of public criticism. Is it viewed that the company is trying to outsource the problem and not really own up to it? Then there's a loss of control. CEOs of large companies want to feel in control of the problem, not that it's kind of been thrown out there into the public realm. Then there's legal liability and reputational risk as well. We've been working and getting more and more comfort with this, with crowdfunding. One of our initial experiences with working with the crowd was in prediction markets. There we used the crowd to forecast sales of HIV medications, but not going into the methodology. It was really just, I think, interesting what we learned from that. And we saw that the internal company crowds and our curated medical crowds, right, so external doctors, were generally aligned in terms of how they predicted the usage of new products and the old products. And when they didn't agree, there was actually something interesting to be learned from that. Why wasn't that happening? It wasn't just noise. We also saw that the HIV experts didn't fare any better at forecasting than the general medical community. And I think there was a recognition that there's a difference between what the crowd thinks versus groupthink. And especially anybody who's been in a large company can certainly understand what groupthink is. And then we're thinking that the crowd is basically an extension of that, it's groupthink. But really what the crowd thinks is really more the aggregation of many, many individual responses. One of our next experiences with the crowd was actually just taking a very traditional type of project. And in this case, we wanted to understand the socio-political landscape on a certain subject that was important to us. It was a very nebulous subject matter. It's that nobody comes out and says outright, I'm an expert in this subject. So how do we go about finding that out and creating that landscape? So you can see a little bit about the network of people, how they connected, and their position on the matter. But what we learned from this experience, as we were really looking at using crowdfunding, and our vendor was Qforma, what we learned was that tapping into this diverse pool of a curated crowd was very cost effective. Normally, had we done that type of research, I think we would have spent about 6 months with a handful of researchers, 4 to 5, whereas all of a sudden we were able to tap into more than 150 researchers around the globe with many different languages, connecting all the dots for us. This was accomplished in 8 weeks at a fraction at the cost. But one of the big concerns about this, and this is where I had to get very involved in it, was what are you doing, right? It was a black box to me. I need to get a sense of the quality control. If I'm hiring you to find out what I don't know, anything you feed me could be science fiction. What guarantee do I have that this is making sense? When I understood the quality control process, then I began to feel more comfortable with it. And then especially when I start looking at some of the things I do know, and then being able to find it mapped out in the final product, then that gives me a far greater sense of comfort. I know that this is Crowdopolis, and I'm talking to a lot of technologists, loves technology. But having worked with our IT group now for several years, I just don't even think of technology as the bottleneck anymore, right? I just assume that it can be done. And really, what I have to think about is, how am I going to take this project and deconstruct it or formulate it in such a way that it can be tackled by a technology, and I just assume somebody's going to step up to the plate on that one. I would say don't get so focused on the method, right? But rather, what is the benefit you're going to deliver, right? What is that success story? Those were 2 projects, and now I'm going to go into our 3rd project that we've actually just recently launched. It's Caring Crowd, and we had 1 project that got funded, and we have another project that's less than $500 away of its $30,000 limit, and that project is to help train emergency physicians in Uganda. Uganda has no emergency physicians. US has 35,000 emergency physicians. So that project would actually fund the training of Uganda's first emergency physicians. That's all happened in 3 weeks. I'm going to show you a video about Caring Crowd.
Public health starts with the community. Building connections between people passionate about health is a powerful way to improve, protect, and save lives. Every day, nonprofits with on-the-ground experience and knowledge of local communities work to improve health and deliver technologies. Through smart, targeted projects, these organizations address critical health issues for those most in need. Yet many nonprofits face a critical challenge: funding. You can help. You have the power to make an impact on public health, one project at a time. How? By mobilizing massive networks and directing funding to efforts that lack the resources they need to create real change where access to healthcare is limited. We've created a unique new tool to help make this a reality. Caring Crowd is where public health comes together. We're 100% dedicated to public health. Here, project owners can find donors, and people who want to support global public health can find projects that need funding right now. Project owners set a fundraising goal and deadline. If people want to support a project, they can make a pledge to help make it happen. There is no charge for project owners to use Caring Crowd. That means more donations reach organizations in need to support the greatest possible impact. The concept is simple, but the results are powerful. Raise small amounts of money from large numbers of people for specific global health projects. Here's how it works. Nonprofit project owners can create and submit a project description, fundraising goal, and deadline. All submitted projects are thoroughly vetted by a team of Caring Crowd advisors to ensure they fall within our definition of public health. Donors can learn about the projects and people in need directly from project owners. Choose a project they're passionate about and make a donation to help make it happen. Donors and project owners alike can mobilize their networks, letting friends and family know how they can contribute to support shared goals. Funding on Caring Crowd is all or nothing. Projects must reach their funding goals in order to receive money, and donors will be charged only if the project reaches its goal. Project owners can share progress and achievements from fully funded projects with donors, building a global movement addressing some of the world's most serious public health challenges. Together, we can make a difference in the health of the world. Caring Crowd, where public health comes together.
It's nonprofit organizations who are looking to fund their projects. They go onto our platform. It's free. We don't charge for use of the platform. And a lot of these projects are coming from these NGOs that don't have access to huge marketing budgets or incur huge overhead for that. So really, that's what we're trying to help enable. This is, at the end of the day, about health, and it's a very serious issue. Just show of hands, how many people are familiar with the potato salad project? So that came out in Kickstarter. A guy came out and said, okay, I want $10, and he ended up walking away with $55,000 for making a potato salad. So it started off as a joke, but he walks away with $55,000. So that works for Kickstarter, and it's funny, it's entertaining, but it doesn't work in public health, and so it's a very serious issue. So we have to protect the integrity of the type of project, and to that effect, that's why we brought in experts as well to help judge, is this a bona fide public health project? So we have experts coming from Liverpool's School of Tropical Medicine, from Princeton University, globalhealthhub.org, Northwestern University, and Harvard as well. And we're always working to increase that list of experts. They're so passionate about this, they work pro bono. We also have an academic collaboration going on with Columbia University School of Public Health. It is very heartwarming, I would say, when you look at this connection of the passion in public health and then making it happen through crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. It's just such a great and natural fit. This is what the Caring Crowd website actually looks like. It has that Kickstarter model. We get questioned about that all the time, but a lot of it is just because if you need an ultrasound unit, you can't get half a ultrasound unit. It's all or nothing. You get the full unit or you don't. So all the projects are all or nothing for that reason. Where are we heading? We recognize crowdfunding is really probably the first most important aspect of this. Public health projects are complicated. The project design is very complicated, right? I mean, there's a lot of contention, different priorities. I mean, even if you think about vaccination programs, I mean, we all know how much discussion has been generated in this country alone in vaccination programs. There's local manpower that needs to be sourced, the funding, assets, specialized knowledge. So one thing is just manpower, but another thing is medical knowledge, legal knowledge, et cetera. And I really like the potential of crowdsourcing to be able to tap into local knowledge. So one of the examples I have here is very interesting, is that a group of engineers in Peru, and in Lima, in the area of Lima, it never rains. It's a coastal city, but it never rains, and it's 100% humidity year-round. And what the local engineers did is they actually created a billboard that collected the water. So a lot of these billboards are hanging over shanty towns, and then they provide water for the local community. And I just find that fascinating story because I don't think an engineer sitting in Nebraska would have been able to think of that, right? I mean, it's not going to go through his head that it's 100% humidity, but it never rains. So bringing that in is incredibly powerful. So we've started with Caring Crowd and the funding aspect of it. We've already initiated work streams on ideation, basically the open innovation aspect of it, and then the sharing of skill sets. So ultimately, we're building towards something more comprehensive, recognizing that we have many years ahead of us. We have to build the community. It's not only about the technology, but it's galvanizing that community together. So what do we hope this could look like? Somebody could come up with an idea. They could use open innovation to draft that project. They could access people with skill sets and availability. They could obtain goods, maybe even through the sharing economy, the developing sharing economy. They could access funds for that, and then even find the administrative and project management tools around for that. So that's our hope. That's what we're working towards. It's going to be a while before we get there. And a lot of it, too, is going to be a lot of just getting comfortable on how to do that. And we're finding, even as we're starting out with crowdfunding, we're just finding out so many new things every day. New things that help it and other things that we hadn't thought about, and we have to figure out how we solve those. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Give him a round of applause.